Chiro Gold interview with the one and only Dr. Joe Straus. So glad to have you here again, as always. Good morning on this Wednesday before Christmas.
Is that what it is? I don't know. The days run together.
When you're retired, every day's a weekend, and it's
yeah, right.
Hey, so today what we're going to do is we're going to continue with our study of the principles, the 33 principles. We'll pick up on principle 12 here in a moment. But I personally was just reading a book from a friend in here in town that he lent me. And it's a technique book, and the technique doesn't really matter. That's not the important thing. But one of the things that I was reading in there, the chiropractor who wrote this was talking about being a healer. And for me, when I hear these things, I think that puts us down a path we don't want to go down. We're then taking credit for the ability to heal people. And we play an important role in the healing process, but we are certainly not the ones doing the healing. So I want to start with you, Dr. Joe, and get your input or your thoughts about that, about chiropractors working and trying to build themselves up to this level of being a healer, because it sounds very great, and there's like this noble sound to it that we want to be healers, but I think that it puts us down a path we really don't want to go down. So I just thought maybe get your thoughts on the aspect of chiropractors as being healers.
Mm-hmm. I think that may have already started out when we decided that we wanted to use the term doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and they a lot of chiropractors have used the term doctor because they wanted to build themselves up and get that position, and
Right.
and we've gone from that to doctor of chiropractic medicine, which is kind of a weird term that some chiropractors have used, and I think that a lot of chiropractors have utilized that phraseology
Mm-hmm.
just in order to give themselves a higher position. And in fact, a lot of chiropractors, have used the term doctor, and I've always tried to identify myself as a chiropractor, and
Yes.
rather than a doctor, I'd rather have people know that I was a chiropractor,
Right.
rather than as a doctor of something.
Sure.
And
Because the second you say doctor, most people immediately think medical doctor.
right, and that I want people to start off by knowing what I am. I'm a chiropractor. Right?
Yes.
Maybe doctor of chiropractic is the correct term. Actually, in my state, they wouldn't even allow me to call myself doctor. In fact, they didn't call me doctor, refer to me as doctor until I got my license. And
Oh, wow.
Even when there was correspondence, it was always Mr. And then when I finally did get the official license notification, then I was referred to as doctor, which
Mm-hmm.
again, it really doesn't matter to me. In fact, I think that
Yeah.
most of my patients, practice members would refer to me as Joe or Dr. Joe or something like
Sure.
that. I didn't even really get hung up with that term doctor, and
Right.
I would rather they think I was a chiropractor than a doctor of anything else.
Right.
So that I think is an area where we have to I don't know, perhaps in some cases swallow our pride, even though
Mm-hmm.
we are technically doctors of chiropractic,
Mm-hmm.
if we have a license. In fact, I don't even know whether I still can call myself doctor, since I retired from practice and no longer have an active license. Whether I can still call myself doctor, and it really doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
most people just know me as Joe, and that's good enough. but
And that goes down what we're talking about here, this idea of being the healer. So we have this desire, maybe some chiropractors do, to want to be on this certain plane, and part of that is taking the title of doctor and then becoming the healer. And I think that the slippery slope we find ourselves going down is that, when we start assuming that role, well, now we're taking credit for the body's healing, and it's so misleading and so dishonest. We're not the ones. I don't have the ability to heal anybody, but thankfully that person's body that I'm adjusting has the ability to heal itself. And that's why I have such a problem with chiropractors trying to assume the role of healer. That's you're telling that person that you are healing them, and there's nothing further from the truth. You're assisting in the process, allowing that person's body's innate intelligence to better express itself so it can do the healing. So we're playing a role in it, but we are by no means at all doing the healing. So
yeah, we're at best a facilitator of the healing process, but then because actually any doctor really is just facilitating the healing process, even if he's given drugs or something like that. He's only either doing something to treat a symptom or to treat an effect, and eventually it's the body that's going to have to do the healing. It's the innate wisdom of the body that does the healing. And so even a medical doctor is truly not a healer. He may give a drug or set a broken bone, but he doesn't heal anybody. The innate intelligence of that person's body does the healing and moves the bone and actually sets the bone. All we really do is introduce an intelligent force, hopefully an intelligent force that the body can utilize to correct a vertebral subluxation. And then after that, it's the body that does the healing or moves the bone back into its proper position. And the body does the healing if in fact it has the wherewithal or the capacity or it's not past limitations that can still do that. So I think that's probably something that we really need to kind of communicate to people, that we're not really doing the healing. That way we don't take any credit and we don't take any blame for an individual not being able to heal or get well, or it's the body that does that if it still has the capability of doing it, and we really just play a small part in that process. I think BJ said.
And that brings us back to why knowing our philosophy and especially these 33 principles, is so important, because that way we can communicate these things to people in a way that makes sense. That when you say we don't take the responsibility or the blame, well, some people, if they don't understand this, will see that as, oh, you're just taking the easy way out by not accepting the blame. It's like, well, I can't accept the blame because I don't accept the responsibility, because I have no control on whether or not this person's body is going to heal up. The only thing I have control over is giving the best possible adjustments to aid that person's body in correcting that subluxation. And beyond that, I can't heal them, so I don't have control over that. And if you don't know this stuff here, and if you don't know, that's my point, is if we don't know this stuff, you have a hard time communicating that to people, and you just get yourself into trouble. That's why it's so important you know our philosophy.
So that people can understand what we're doing, and it really makes sense to them. I mean, people know that if they cut their finger, the body's going to heal itself. And maybe that's where we need to start off with this, is getting people to really understand what healing is all about. It comes from the word heal or health comes from wholeness, and in a sense, what we're doing is creating a wholeness, or creating a situation in which the innate intelligence of the body is now in communication with, or is being expressed through the material of the body. So that's what creates the wholeness or the oneness of the innate wisdom of the body and the material function of the body. And that's what we can do. That's our objective, is to create that situation in which that process is taking place, and that's unifying the intelligence and the matter of the body, and that's
Right.
that's what we're doing, and that's all we're doing,
Right.
and we can't take any more. We can't do any more and take any more credit or take the blame if
Right.
not being done.
Exactly.
And I think that's an important thing for people to understand what we do, and it
And if you're assuming the role of healer, well, then you're going to be taking the blame when they don't heal up. Is the point?
right, right.
So,
And I often wonder what would have happened if BJ had DD, I should say, had given that first adjustment, and Harvey Lord's hearing was not restored. If in fact it was totally restored, he probably would have said to himself, "Well, that was a good theory, but it didn't work. Let's try
right.
something else." And I don't know what we would be doing these days, but
Right. Very true.
we wouldn't be adjusting subluxations, and that would have kind of lessened what we do as chiropractors,
For
and
sure.
and probably would have been off in another direction. And there were
Mhm.
so many, quote, as you say, healers during those days. I mean, there were all kinds of healers during the mid 1800s, and when I taught a history course in chiropractic school, we went over some of those healers, and some of them had some really good concepts,
Sure.
interesting concepts, but it really wasn't what we're doing,
Mhm.
and anybody who's doing something else today is still not doing what we're doing. That is restoring the proper relationship between the matter and the innate intelligence of the body. And so we get off on tangents and go down the rabbit trails all the time. And the one that a lot of chiropractors do is say as well, I move the bones and God does the healing, which is it's not correct, but in a
Right.
sense, it's the only God that ever healed as a man
Yeah.
lived thousands of years ago,
Right.
and we don't even do that. We don't even do that healing. We just facilitate the expression of the intelligence of the body, that
Mhm.
principle of life, or what we call the innate intelligence of the body, being expressed through the material of the body, and uniting those two together and enabling that to
Mhm.
restore wholeness or oneness or healing or health.
Right.
That's our function.
Perfect. Excellent. Awesome. Well, I think we've covered that idea that we're not healers. So moving on, we ended last week with principle 11. So now we are on principle 12, which is the interference with transmission of universal force.
Okay, we did cover the character of universal forces. They're
Yes.
unswerving, unadapted, and have
Yes.
no.
Last week. Yep. We talked about how, because I was like a lot of people, they're a little bit maybe confused, thinking that it's always a negative thing. And we discussed that it isn't always a negative thing, that it's a necessary part of life, that we have to have things breaking down, and in order to build things back up, for life to go on, we have to have the breakdown process as much as the building up process. So
Yeah,
yeah,
metabolism and anabolism, right?
yeah, exactly.
And that's what we we deal with. And granted, the universal force is, it says, is unadapted and tend to be destructive towards
Hmm.
structural matter. And that's only because that's the perspective that we have.
Right.
So the
And we tend to put a negative image on destructive things, but it's really part of a necessary process.
right, all
Good
those
or bad is
fires that they had in California a few
yeah.
weeks ago, the fire were universal forces, fire act as a universal force, and caused a destructive situation.
Mm-hmm.
When it started to rain out there, then I'm sure that the beginning part of that rain helped to put out the fire, but
Right.
then so the rain acted as a universal force, one universal force negating another one. That is the rain negating the effects of the fire.
Right.
But then for a while, that universal force caused mudslides, which then was not exactly what they wanted. And then the next
Right.
problem that all the people in California had were
Mm-hmm.
mudslides as a
Right.
result of the rain having that effect on. So
Yeah.
I think that's an important concept. I think that's probably where we get to the fact that universal forces, while they can be destructive towards structural matter, um, are really uh, just it only depends on how we view it or the situation we're in.
Right.
With the passage of the Bible says, the rain rains upon the just and the unjust,
Mm-hmm.
and it depends upon what our circumstances are. If when we look at that rain, the rain starting on the fire, we're very happy, and for a while until it starts getting too great for the soil to hold,
Mm-hmm.
and then the mudslides begin. So
Right.
it depends upon our perspective and
Right.
where we are, and that's something that's very subjective, I think, and we don't deal with subjectivity in chiropractic. We deal with objective
Mm-hmm.
principles, and the
Yep.
principle is that universal force tends to uh, break down matter into its simplest components.
Mm-hmm.
If it didn't, we would be up to our ears in dead leaves and dead
Right.
animals and
Right.
everything else. But
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the process to break it down to its simplest components, and that's what the universal forces do, and that's
Yes.
the so-called destructive aspect of them.
Right.
But then, of course, they become constructive by the innate intelligence of the body, and
Mm-hmm.
the innate intelligence of the tree will take that destructive force that breaks the leaves that fall off in the fall, and the innate intelligence of the tree will then change those leaves into living matter, new leaves that come out in the springtime. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the anabolism, the catabolism aspect of the leaf.
Yes.
And I remember Reggie used to say, when you eat an apple, your body breaks down that apple into living human tissue, and
Mm-hmm.
but he said, so if you eat an apple, it may have been somebody's Uncle Charlie at one time before he died, and
Maybe you don't want to think about that part of it.
became an apple tree.
Yeah.
Uh,
So there we have then, kind of wrapping up principle 11, the destructive qualities of universal, or the characteristic of universal forces. And as we go to number 12, we see then that these universal forces can be interfered with, which is a good thing, because then we can somewhat maybe harness their power that they have. And this starts to get us a little bit here, a little bit of talk about how it might affect in the body. So principle 12, interference with transmission of universal force. There can be interference with transmission of universal forces. And he gives all kinds of examples here where a tree makes shade from the sun, lead plates interfere with X-rays, and so on. And then how each of these universal forces does seem to have a preference of the material they flow through, which we know to be true with things like electricity. And that because of what I want to get to here, as he refers to the preference that nerve impulses have for nerve tissue, and how that can be interfered with. And then I just want to get onto your thoughts here and your comments, because I think you bring up a great point here about how if these universal forces can travel in a radiant form, then can we maybe assume that innate intelligence, innate forces also can travel without in a radiant form, but how it might create a little bit of a problem for our concept of a subluxation.
Yeah, the innate forces are traveling in. Would you say what kind of form?
In a radiant form.
A radiant form. Well, we know that there's innate forces that cause a tree to grow, and I think that those innate forces travel in different ways, and I think that we can see that that there's another passage in the Bible that says the life of the flesh is in the blood. Well, when you when you transfer blood into an individual, or change that flow of blood, a transfusion doesn't put new life into that individual. It puts new blood into that individual.
Right.
And the life that there may be a force that's traveling radiantly over that in that blood, but that's not what's keeping people alive. It's the forces that are traveling over the nerve system that we as chiropractors deal with. I would imagine that transfusing blood into an individual creates, in a sense, life into an individual, and of course, Christian theology says that the life is in the soul rather than in the blood, and my theology says that passage that says the life of the flesh is in the blood is referring to animal life, because an animal doesn't have a soul in Christian theology. So that life is in the blood refers to an animal, and that's the context in which that passage just talks about the killing of a lamb. And fortunately, they didn't kill other people during the sacrificial lamb was a lamb, and of course in Christian theology, Jesus Christ acted as the sacrificial lamb in the sacrifice that he did on the cross. But we need to identify or delineate the difference between the life of the flesh in animals and the life of an individual traveling over the nerve system, the expression of intelligence through matter. We say that, okay, there may be other ways in which that life is transmitted, maybe, as you said, different ways in which it's transmitted, but the one that we deal with in chiropractic is not doing blood transfusions. It's correcting interference in the nerve system. That's the one we do. Does a medical doctor who does a blood transfusion, is he restoring some other form of life to an individual? Well, in a sense, he is, but that's not the manner, the mode, or the way in which we do it in chiropractic. We restore the expression of life within the body. by removing interference in the
Mhm.
nervous system. And then there are chiropractors who try to say, well, there are probably other ways in which that interference can occur.
Right.
And we say, well, there may be, and they may be valuable, and they may be helpful to people, and maybe someone needs to do it. It's just not
Right.
our as chiropractors. I have a
With that in mind, let me just read to you what you wrote in your comment section in regards to Principle 12, and it's going with what you're saying right now. And what you wrote in response to Principle 12 here is, if the forces of the universe can travel in the radiant form, like sunlight, I added that part, the like sunlight part, in radiant form, then can we also not assume that innate forces also travel in ways other than just over the nerve system? It would seem that many alternative therapies would agree with this supposition. Where we run into a problem is in finding a cause for an interference in the condition of these forces. It is not sufficient to say the forces travel over meridians or even fields in the body. They must be able to demonstrate how interference to transmission occurs. We in chiropractic have our idea relative to the subluxation. Other fields, it seems, have yet to present a logical explanation. Well said.
yeah. And in fact, I took a seminar with I think it was a continuing education seminar. It was not one I thought was going to be very helpful to me, but there were some other chiropractors there, and they talked about this one technique that a chiropractor used, and that he believed that there are interferences that occur other ways, and that he wanted to remove interference to the expression of those forces in some other way. And we went round and round. Uh, I won't even mention the technique
Sure.
because you would right away know what one it was, and of course he named it after himself. The
They often
technique.
do.
Pardon me.
They often do.
Yes, yes, and and he actually he taught it at a chiropractic college at the same time, and then he magnificently discovered this technique and went out on his own and teaches it today. And but we finally went around and around, and finally I got to the point and said, well, there may be something to that, but it was not it was not chiropractic.
Right.
It didn't, and of course he
That's
went
what
to
you're saying right here in this comment, I believe, is just that. Well, there might be other things and the other ways that the innate forces transmit through the body, but what we deal with is the interference when it happens as it's being transmitted through the nervous system. Just like, again, we don't argue that there is a need for some medical procedures, but it is in chiropractic. So we can
right,
recognize that some of these things do exist, and it might be the case, but it isn't chiropractic.
right, and someone might need to do it.
Sure.
I'm just thankful that that it's not the vascular system that's the uh, prominent means of
Right.
doing, or we'd be doing blood transfusions as chiropractors, and that would be rather messy.
Yeah.
And
I don't like blood, so yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I think that we can easily say, well, there may be other ways to do that. Um, those forces travel over a tree, and that's why a tree in the wintertime looks like it's dead, and then in the summertime, uh, those forces create and make new leaves.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that that's a chiropractic procedure,
Right.
or that there's subluxations. I think they have done some tests where they've uh, affected the passage of those um, impulses in some way, and created an interference with the transmission of those and affected that tree. Uh, they've done tests where they've put bands around the trunk of a tree and affected the function that way. I told the story of a clergyman in our area that had a dogwood tree that he would it was half pink and half white dogwood, and he had brought them together. He had and created a new tree, and people would drive up the street and see this tree, and it was half pink and half white, but he had spliced the tree together, and what do they call that?
I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. But I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the technical term for
Yeah,
it.
well,
I want to say gene splicing, but that's not correct. But
no, it was something that he did with just a tree, and it just happened to be half pink and half white, and that was an interesting thing.
yeah,
To see, but it was not chiropractic. That's
no.
for sure. And but he got a lot of people would stop at his house and look at this tree that
He's a cool tree.
yeah. So anyway, there's so many concepts of this transmission of universal forces where uh, we see that the use of ionizing radiation,
Mm-hmm.
is something that chiropractors have used and have adopted. Those
Right.
chiropractors who take X-rays in order to find the misalignments in the spine that may be an interference in the nerve system, and so they're able to do that, and we're able to use that by, we know the fact that the certain aspects of the body will block or interfere with the passage of ionizing radiation, and that's what enables us to do X-rays. Little interesting factoid was that X-ray was discovered the same year that chiropractic was.
Right.
So people use ionizing radiation.
Well, then I believe, didn't BJ have the first X-ray west of the Mississippi? Is that true? I've heard
that I didn't know. I know he had the first radio station.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But I thought he also had the first X-ray, but it could just be the radio station.
Yeah, I know. I think he had the first radio station.
Okay.
Because the one in Pittsburgh was the first radio station in east of the Mississippi. So I guess his must have been west of the Mississippi.
Yes.
And
WOW. Wow.
Pardon me? Yeah.
Wow. Wonders of WOC.
Wonders
right?
of
Wonders of Chiropractic.
And then I think his first TV station was WHO. Hand only. I think that was.
Oh, okay.
Started the first TV station.
Yep.
But those I guess those are not. Those are historical concepts that we may
fun tidbits of trivia to know.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts here on Principle 12?
This interference with the transmission of universal forces, and I think I mentioned last time we met that when you interfere with the transmission of universal forces, it doesn't mean that those forces have been cut off. It may mean that innate force has been changed into a universal force, and then passes as a universal force, which would mean that there's even more detrimental effect that innate force that's been interfered with, and we don't mean cut off, and if that happens, then whatever that cell dies. But if it's been interfered with, it may be a universal force now and having even more detrimental effects.
Right.
I know they say that that cells can be changed around by universal forces and can become cancer cells and grow greater than there would be any need for them and really cause harm if they become cancer cells. So that this principle number 12 obviously is an important concept to understand, and an important concept people understand that interference means just alteration of the innate force that now becomes a universal force and may have more detrimental effects than we even recognize or say. And of course, there's so much talking now about people's using, well, ionizing radiation can cause the effects, the detrimental effects to the cell, and manifest itself as cancer. And some people even see that the detrimental effects of radio waves and television waves. And I know my granddaughter, my 2-year-old granddaughter, she likes to get right up to the television and stick her nose right up to the screen. And I'm constantly moving her back because we have a big screen TV, but she still wants to get up real close to it. And I said,
every kid in the history of television has done that, right? You want to get as close as possible, get a better view.
Yeah. And so you don't need to be that close, especially since it's a 50-inch television screen. You don't nearly need that to be that close.
She has young 2-year-old eyes. She can see very well from far back.
Right. I need to get closer now, but anyway, so there's a lot of discussion about this principle number 12, the interference with the transmission of universal.
What just came to my mind as you were saying that at the end there is how it's either our body is either under the control of our innate intelligence or it's under the control of universal intelligence. And so when the innate intelligence of the body no longer has control of it, that's when problems start to develop, because now we have these unswerving and unadapted forces that are now controlling the body, which is why chiropractic is so beneficial. We want to make sure that the innate intelligence is always under the control or always has control over the body.
Right.
Start where it doesn't.
Those forces need to be under the control of the innate intelligence of the body. If not, they're going to be subjected to the detrimental effects of universal force. And the ionizing radiation does that, and all these radio waves and do that also, and the television does that, and a verbal subluxation does that. And we don't deal with, well, when I took x-rays, I used to have to stand behind a lead screen to prevent the ionizing radiation from hitting me, and I just had it shoot away from me, and I don't know whatever happened to my neighbors as a result. But the guy who set up the X-ray, he said that the ionizing radiation won't go as far as the neighbor's house, and so you don't have to worry about that. And ultimately, I got rid of the X-ray machine anyhow, and just had his.
And your neighbors weren't glowing?
No, and they had a couple kids that were little monsters, but I don't know. I don't know whether my X-rays had any effect on them.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I think that covers principle 12.
All right.
Well, in there with little monsters. They were not under the control of the full innate intelligence of their body, and that's why they were
Yeah.
little monsters.
Yeah. And I don't know what the ionizing radiation does, but my granddaughter is 2 years old and she's not a little monster.
Good.
Although she's moving into the terrible twos, so
Yeah.
maybe she will be, but she's still my granddaughter.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for taking some
All
time.
right, my
Well,
pleasure.
have a wonderful Christmas.
Yeah, you
And,
too.